Hi, my name is Andrew Alexander King. I'm an explorer, big wave surfer, and alpinist, and you are watching The American Athlete. This is what I love about this sport. It pushes me to, I always say, seek challenge, not danger. It always makes you seek that challenge and make sure you're really okay what's dangerous or not. Coming from Detroit, we didn't have a lot. We only had each other, the tribe, which is my family. My mom worked multiple jobs, had 4 kids, so me and my friends would just run up and down the block. So 200 meters was just as far as we can get from the fire hydrant, where we lived on the corner of our block, all the way down to where you would cross the street to get to our school. And that was a hard race. So I just did track and field, but I didn't know it was track and field. I thought you were just running to run. I didn't know track and field was a sport. So the first sessions were really horrible. I got a board that's just not even close to what I should be riding. I was just like, oh, I'm gonna go get this cool board. And it's not a short board, it's not a long board, it's a gun. So that board is only made for surfing very high performance big waves. I thought it was like, am I gonna be my first cool surfboard? It's big enough, I can ride it? No, you really can't. Couldn't duck dive worth anything because the board isn't made for that. And couldn't ride anything small because the board also isn't made for that. So I got just used to paddling out there. And then over time, I just appreciated it. So those were the first few times. And I also learned like what happens when you lose your leash. It's a long swim back in. Yeah, when you read a wave, I think it's, that's the first step to take after you've gotten through the basics of water safety. How do you read a wave? How do you read the conditions? How do you read the sets coming in? Is it appropriate? Those things usually are things that catch up with other surfers later on. If you take them to bigger spots, like how are they appropriately seeing what's out there? How do you read the horizon and what's coming? And now, I never thought in a million years I'd be getting photographed in surfing. So the other day we're shooting and the photographer is new to water photography and I can see on the horizon what this wave's gonna break and how it's gonna go. And he's like, how do you know? And I say, when you've seen it so much, you can tell. And it's not like rock climbing where it's consistent, it's not static, it's very adaptive, and you have to just understand where to be. And so that's what I love about surfing. It challenges you to not stay complacent, and it pushes you with these very finite moments, resources that like, hey, when that swell's over, it's over. I thought for the longest time that climbing was actually hiking. That is not the truth. It isn't, is it? I would say this, you are climbing a mountain. It's just very disciplines to it. And I was always adventuring, exploring, from technology to outdoors. I just started hiking to find clarity and peace. And so I was like, okay, if the higher I get, the quieter it gets. You start to have a place that you're alone in this kind of echo chamber that you have to admit to yourself what you're lacking. And it's a little bit easier to do when you're not inundated with the noise of society that is like artificial. I just like the feeling when you get up there, you see how insignificant you truly are. And you see how the things you're worrying about are often just filling your space with things so you don't have to deal with your own like silence. And like, it's okay to be silent. I thought it was normal to hike to the top of things and come down and surf in the same day. That is not the way everyone else is doing it. I found out later on. So from there, I transitioned to climb islands around the world. And so over time, it came into when I moved to Los Angeles, I roped up for the first time. So about 4 years ago is when I really learned my figure 8 knot. And that's after like climbing the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, which is down in Argentina and on the border of Chile. And after doing Mount Fuji and after doing Kilimanjaro and those other mountains, those are high altitude, high trekking mountains. They're not technical. When I got into climbing, I was like, okay, this is cool. Rock climbing is very, very hard and intense. But when I found alpinism, it reminded me just as much of surfing.
It was a great time.
You grow up in a place that is very turbulent. I'll just make it more tangible when I say it. Halloween is a day when kids get candy, right? I remember going to my friends' places when I lived with my grandparents. No parents had to check their candy. But I grew up with my mom had to check our candy, or my uncle had to check my candy, because people would do certain things to those candy. Or you grew up in Detroit where you live, like we lived down 2 houses down from a drug house. And I was like, that house would be on fire and they were selling drugs through it. Or my best friend at the time didn't come to school one day and everyone's like, what's going on? The drive-by shooting took her out because they thought they were going after her family, but she was in the car. So those things, as a child is developing, you're also taking that trauma with you like a backpack, and you're not really unpackaging it so much. And you start to have these behaviors and these habits that are basically shielding you per se, and like a callus. So when I got to sit down in the piece of it, I was like, I'm in this place. Everyone at the school looks different than me. I speak just like they do, but I don't look like them. And I wonder why that is. And when I looked at it, it was very frustrating to sit back and be like, you were born here. You've gone through so much. It's time for you to really unpackage that. Sit down with your backpack, take out the books, ask yourself, how did that make you feel? And you don't have to grow up, you're a kid. And so that for me is where I found that piece.